All right, thanks everybody for coming. So we're here to talk about the CI components catalog. So I mean, a lot of folks in Secure started asking questions about it and getting interested in it, and so we want to thank, so Dove, Fabio, thank you all for making yourselves available to come answer questions. And so with that, I will cede the floor, and we've got agenda document going. And so Fabio, you're first, sir.
I just wanted to add there some references, like to some issues that are might be related to what we're discussing. One is that there's an issue where we are converting existing templates to components, and we are asking to team members to dog food and to test them. And another one is kind of related is I'm starting to document some of the steps on how to take a template and convert into a component, and what kind of refactorings we can do there, like what are best practices in the way of writing components. And this ultimately will be converted into user documentation. Yeah. And there's also blog posts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm added a work in progress blog post that I'm working on, which is specifically speaks about components and the advantage the component has. Yeah, so it should be published in a week or so, but you can definitely go and read.
Thank you. I admit that is very interesting to me. I understand a few of the benefits that are mentioned in the docs or the blueprints. What I've missed so far, and I like the opportunity to dive further into it, but is from a customer standpoint, what it takes to move from a catalog, from a template to a component. That's our, at least in competition it is for me, that's the main concern. The template is our integration point between our external tools, which are the analyzers, with the monolith, and this is enabled by default. This is super easy for the customers. They just have to drop an include statement, nothing to configure by default, and that's a very easy process by default. They often have to customize, but at least out of the box, this is a very simple process. Yeah, my first item was we are excited about that because as I said, we are using the templates, and we sometimes have some difficulties to manage them. It's super easy to break existing customers' configuration because they are so flexible. There can be so many configuration applied on top of our default content that it's difficult to manage them over time. So something like versioning might be very beneficial for us. So we're super excited about that. But what you should expect from our end is some extra caution, because moving from what we have today to the next one, the components might be super disruptive for our customers. So we have to be very, very well prepared for making that transition.
Yeah, just a clarifying question on the transition. Are you saying that we are planning to kind of maintain the template, so customers still keep using the template, but template redirects to a component? Or
I don't know. That's the kind of question I'd like to answer. Today, the templates, we are maintaining them. It's a very important part of our integration workflow. We don't know what to do with the components. To be honest, we were a bit surprised. We were not looking enough at that part, so focused on the other items. So when we learned that there was some dogfooding to transition the security templates to that, the biggest concern for me is what are the expectations for our group? Is there an additional maintenance cost? Should we take support requests for customers trying those? This is very important for us to be aware about what's being done there, because our analyzers are made to be integrated within the template. So if there is another integration point that we don't manage ourselves, we can miss some issues, and we can break customers' usages because we're not aware about what's happening there. So this is something that we haven't yet settled on, but this is part of this conversation. Is so far what I'm understanding is that since it's experimental and we're trying to dogfood that internally, There is no expectation from the security analyzer teams to maintain those templates actively and be responsible for dealing with customer requests. This is very experimental, and that's fine because we have very high priority features to work on right now. But if the intent product-wise is to transition all the templates to the components, then we definitely need to be much more involved and have a defined timeline so we can invest time into that process, because I'm expecting that to be a complicated transition indeed. We haven't had the opportunity to do any testing on our end so far, but I'm very eager to see how that works. And again, what's the customer impact for transitioning to template to components?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of like the product roadmap, I do see us eventually, like as a company, migrate from templates to component. Still, component is experimental. We might have like additional changes. So I wouldn't expect this team to maintain the component for the customer until we'll make component GA. As Fabio mentioned, the intention for us is to make sure, first of all, you be aware of what is coming and what is the expectation, the product expectation. And number two, dog food, try it out, because eventually we do see the benefit of using components over templates. I'm hoping you can see it also, and if not, we can explain. And so the more you use it internally, you can provide us the feedback, and then we can quickly take it back and implement it with our engineers.
Cool. Thank you for adding detail on that. Again, really don't want to be looking at we pushing back. We're interested into that. It's just a matter of making sure that we're aligned on the responsibility there and the risk that comes with these changes. The second question was more about the timeline. I was looking at the iteration plan in the Epic, and it looks to me that it was around 16.3 that we were planning to move to GA. Is that correct?
Look, I don't think we'll.
GA is too soon for 16.3. Yeah. We want still move to beta first, and ideally, try to complete dog fooding as quick as possible, so we can fix anything that we can fix, even kind of introduce breaking changes if we have to, and then move it to beta, and then from there we start the move to GA. Yeah, that's why we are trying to prioritize dog fooding as much as possible now.
Yeah, I think that by 16.3, maybe we can move it to beta. I'm not sure. We still have some discussions about the architecture of the component, and also based on the feedback we receive, we can change things. So if we move something, it will be from experimental to beta, and only then we'll move it to GA. So I assume that once we'll move component from experimental to beta, this will probably signal, okay, like our intention to make sure it is GA, and this will probably signal, okay, now we need to make the preparation for, start converting some of those components into template. And as I mentioned, if you use it, I'm pretty sure you'll see the benefit that that eventually will get to your users. And based on that, I would expect that like anyone that has template will convert those into component, because basically, and maybe I can elaborate a bit about the advantage of components over templates. I guess there are a few. Number one, there is we have like full version control. So you can mention specific version, you can tag a specific version. So there is no fear of breaking or introducing breaking change. There isn't the concept of breaking change, basically, because everything will be version. This is number one. Number two, when users will use it, they have a way to opt in for the latest. So they could in their pipeline when they are using it. It could always use the latest verified component. And I'm saying verified because you can introduce tests as a part of your workflow, and customers could use tests in order to test the component. And again, it's up for anyone that is maintaining a template, that is maintaining a component, a pipeline, or even on us to provide like set of tests that we believe are right. But I assume that every team and every organization will have different series of tests, but they can make sure that the release of a component, meaning introducing a new version, will be pending on tests. So every time a customer will opt in for the latest version, it will always be the test and certified / verified version. And this is just for the component. In the next iteration, we are going to introduce the catalog. And the catalog will be the place for the user. Basically, it will be the single source of truth to see what are the available components in your organization. So it actually amplified the value of component with that catalog. So component by itself makes have like a great value over templates. But if you combine that with the catalog, it will even provide an even better value for our customers.
That's a very interesting point. There is a drawback, though, that we need to further investigate. Is versioning is great for stability for the users. The counterpart is on maintenance cost for us, because this means we have to maintain a compatibility matrix between all the versions that we currently support. On one hand, on the component, on the other hand, with the Rails analyzers, the Rails platform, and on the other hand, with the analyzers. This is something that we encountered in the past, and to be honest, having just one template has many disadvantages because, well, it's not version, but the main advantage is there's just single version that a template that we have to maintain for a given version of Rails. So this is another problem that we're facing, for instance, with the security report format. So we have a schema, a JSON schema for the security report that we send to the Rails platform, and we have this compatibility matrix issue. It makes things much more complicated. So it's good on one way, but it can come with added maintenance costs. So that's a very interesting point for us to dig further into and figure out what would be the greatest release cycle and support policy for versions, so that we don't explode the maintenance costs on our end. But yeah, definitely that makes things more reliable for customers. Thank you.
Yeah, I would assume that yes, every team will have their own to define their own policy for for making sure we are backward compatible, and like what are the versions that you support. This is something that I would say it's not something for us to decide. I guess every team will do what they think should do. We'll just provide you with the tools, with the means. You'll decide if you want to have, like, I don't know, support like 2 versions back, 3 versions back, or only the latest. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, but at that moment, the problem is, I mean, it's not a big problem again, and this comes maybe with some other things we need to train the customers on. But if your customer is pinning the component to a given version, for instance, at the time we drop support for that one, they have to manually update their template to bump the version of the component they're using. So again, that's good for stability. I can disagree on that, but this is a first customer impact to me, that they have a manual action to do anytime we're switching versions, or at least doing some breaking changes, and they don't want to have them apply to them by following the latest tag, for instance. So that's fine, that's okay, but that's a part of thing that we need to consider on our end to make the customer aware of that new approach.
Yeah, I think this depends. Then every component will have its own strategy for support, so, and recommended strategy. So I think it's up maybe. But one thing we're doing with the components is that there is also integrated documentation for every component. there's also discussion like, should we even maintain documentation on the GitLab docs for specific analyzers, like how to use and customize like templates, or should this documentation go into the component README? Because like GitLab docs, we can specify this is the capabilities we provide. If you want to know how to use this in your CI YAML and how to customize for specific, how to tune it particularly, you can refer to the docs in the component. So there is like, maybe every component will have its own recommended way of dealing with version like upgrades and things like that. There's definitely, maybe for a lot of security products, using the latest. If we maintain backward compatibility, the use of latest might be the one kind of a lot of the time kind of suggested, but for some customer it might be better to pin it, or to pin it if we are introducing a breaking change, so they actually know they have to pin it, so they don't get the breaking change immediately, stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see like if there is anything in the design that makes life more difficult. At the same time, we are kind of trying to understand what are the general workflows that we can support like across the software development lifecycle. But yeah, if we encounter anything that is problematic, please let us know. We are kind of definitely eager to get some feedback on that.
I guess the next question is mine. So I just wanted to check if we one of the way how we allow users to kind of modify the templates is just like basically modify the template. So it's very important, the workflow. So our components support the same feature as well.
So how do users modify the template today? I'm not clear on the use case.
This just basically can in the ACI templates, you can just kind of write the job and just modify, for example, before script. One of the use cases, for example, they need to install something to run our scanner.
So okay, kind of to override some.
Yeah, override. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it should work the same way. So there is things you can do with components. Yeah, you can actually take the template as is, move into like a directory structure that is supported by components, and that works as is. Like you are translating like a template to a component. There's some best practices that I'm documenting on one of the first links on the top of the page, that we can actually do certain things better. Nowadays, we introduce inputs for templates. So certain things could be leveraged through inputs. Like for example, one of typical kind of anti-pattern nowadays, since we have inputs, would be you hard code like a stage into a job into the template. But then if you actually don't want that job to run in the test stage, you want to run a different stage, then you have to go and override the stage for every jobs that are included. So in some ways, you have to know the implementation details of the template to be able to override it. Instead, there is some kind of best practice we are starting to recommend, like use inputs to say, I want to add this bunch of jobs in this stage. And then if you want, you can still override them afterwards, but like at least you can inject input and not caring too much about how the jobs are structured. And a lot of the override can be done that way. But since the components today are some template types, so they are included into the GitLab CI YAML, you have the same capabilities of going and override jobs or add before script or anything like that.
Okay, great. And the second question, just basically, I didn't find it in the documentation and in the issue, but are the components supposed to replace template in the future? is it supposed to be kind of new version of the same feature?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think like internally we discussed this with the team, and we kind of think that this is where we are heading. But I think templates are super popular with our users, so it will take a significant amount of time until we can actually say, okay, we are getting rid of templates and now components is the new template. This is indeed our aspiration. This is where we would like to see everyone is going. But I would say I would be very cautious of like giving like, you know, this kind of statements before we actually test it properly, before we get it in the hands of the customers. So to answer your question, yes, but you know, it depends. I hate to give it depends, but it really depends.
There is also in our architecture blueprint that where we design components and try to define a vision there. And again, all of this kind of future-proof, future statements are not guaranteed to happen, but it's kind of part of the vision. And one of these aspects is that we wanted to make components also available across GitLab instances. So that you can say on a self-managed instance, you can say, I want to include SaaS component from gitlab.com. So we can imagine gitlab.com being also provider of components for self-managed, or you can import from other GitLab instances. So this will be like also could be a way for us to eventually move away from templates, because we can move away from templates easily or relatively easily in principle on SaaS. But the problem is more, how do we ship what we currently ship with the GitLab instance, the templates, how can user have the same capabilities? And so having the ability of using templates from other instances will be a way for us to start thinking about possibly retiring templates. But again, this is kind of still needs to be evaluated over time. But it's like interesting kind of idea we can explore.
And I have a follow-up question in this case. What about offline instances? Because it's kind of a very big question for security analyzers. We need to support offline instances. So how, in this case, it will work with like for some self-managed instance, which need to get a component from gitlab.com, but it's offline and doesn't have an access to the internet.
So this is kind of, was discussed in this, and we still don't know yet in the details, but the idea could be that you could, so we could either pre-populate certain projects as a component project with the GitLab instance. So in a way, instead of having templates, you have some GitLab managed projects that are kind of pre-built with your GitLab instance, or have ability to import templates, components from using Git, for example. So you will have a way of porting these repositories over to the same network and then load them, like import them into GitLab. And then once you import the project, this should work as other components project. So there's kind of some of ideas, but nothing kind of actually supported today.
Well, that was actually my next question. Thank you, Tatiana. Looks like we're heading in the same direction. Yeah, indeed, that's a good question, and this is to me something that will be part of the GA process. Again, we're not there yet, but this is the kind of feedback that you might expect from us. That there are very advanced usage of the template from our end, and ultimate customer are very, very, they have high expectations. So it's difficult sometimes. So I just move on to the next one then. What are your expectations for the dog fooding process? Like, let's say the period of time from now to around 16.3 when you'd like to move to beta. Do you expect to do the testing on your own, or do you expect to delegate that part to each group, which is supposedly responsible for the component? And the reason I'm asking is particularly entirely planning wise, just to make sure we have the corresponding capacity allocated for that work. And this is validated with our respective product managers.
Yeah, I think that our team could only support migration or moving from template to component, but validating the reliability of each template is something that I don't think we can actually do. So while I would very much like for other teams to start converting by themselves templates to component, I know that this is something that, especially at the beginning, something that probably will be in some parts our team responsibility, like we've done with several components, and maybe we'll do some hand holding later on with other teams. But to validate the reliability of each component is something that we simply could not do. So it's something that we really rely on the respective team, each team for their specific template/component that they are responsible for.
Then my question might be entirely administrative, but is that something that you brought into the product organization to get some buy-in from your counterpart dev so that they get that prioritized in their respective roadmap? Because currently the way it's coming at us is through the engineering organization. And this means that I don't mind about that, but this means that it's up to us, to each engineering team, to bring that back to their respective product manager for prioritization. I don't know about other groups, but definitely in our, we have high pressure to complete some other items. So I don't know what would be the response from my PM about how much time I can spend on that. So that's why I'm suggesting that maybe on your side, you're also trying to get some buy-in from your counterparts so that across the company, there is a bit of time allocated for each corresponding group to work on that. I think that's a great improvement. I know it's difficult right now to prioritize because there are just so many things that are high priority, but it would be great, yeah, if that also gets some buy-in for the product teams.
Yeah, already had conversation with Connor. I have no problem doing like follow-ups. So I'll make sure to do that.
Yeah, just a note on the dog fooding. So we've been creating some, converting some templates to components just for the sake of exercise and validate first ourselves what's this experience look like. But ideally, we would like to see teams to convert components by themselves and even and get feedback for, is it difficult? Is it easy? What did you find difficult? Because this is kind of validation is very important to us to understand, this, even, validating how easy is the migration. Is there something we should have made better in the design or things like that, or we should fix, rather than like giving like a component that is like almost done. It just needs like some extensive testing and maybe some fixes. It's great at the beginning, but like ideally we would like also to see like just convert like a component from scratch that, without maybe following a documentation that we created, some practice there, and give us feedback on this process.
Maybe piggybacking off that question, you've converted the SAST and the code quality templates over to the catalog. So thank you for doing that. We're right now testing that. Mm-hmm. Similarly, to Olivier's question, like if we're planning on doing the migration for the secret detection template as well, and then the testing for that, would that need to fall within that same timeline before we hit beta? Or I guess what are the timeline expectations of doing the migration as well as the testing or the validation? Like, do we need to be completed with the dog fooding migration and testing by a certain date?
I don't know, Doc, what do you think about? I don't have an answer.
Yeah, we didn't thought about specific dates. We kind of want to give like team enough time to prep for that. Give me a second. Some family emergency.
Yeah, I think the sooner, the more feedback we get, the sooner we get the feedback from dog fooding, the more confident we will feel in moving from experiment to beta. But I think without an extensive dog fooding, we will feel like less comfortable in moving to beta. Because then if we realize there's something that we might want to introduce breaking changes, with beta still possible, but it's a more kind of, it's ideal to introduce breaking changes in the experiment phase.
That makes sense. So like possibly a requirement to get to beta would to have all the components that are in use migrate, or templates in use migrated components fully tested.
So there is no strict timeline, but at the same time, the sooner we get some feedback, and it might be that we don't have to convert a certain number of components to get this confidence. It could be that once we do with a few components, it's enough. But I think it's more about for us to have feedback so we feel confident to move from experiment to beta.
Thank you.
What I was saying is it's not we might not have like a strict timeline, but it's more about the confidence. So the more dog fooding we do now and the more feedback we get, the more confident we'll feel like moving from experiment to beta.
Yeah, and I have to say that our customers also will start using components regardless of the templates that we have today. So we'll get feedback from them, and eventually we'll move templates to components. And if indeed there will be like an adoption as we expect, I would expect customers that actually ask you, okay, can we create a component from template because of the benefit that they have, because of the work that we are doing with the catalog, because of basically the need that we see that there is out there in the field. So component is not just to be clear. Components are not just the templates that GitLab maintain. Components might replace all the templates that our customer use with all the includes that they are doing, everything. And so it just makes sense that if we ask customers to move from templates to components, that GitLab will also do this step. Ideally, we need to do that before our customers, but as I know our customers, I think they will even be ahead of us. So we might eventually get like this ask from the customers even.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, because we're putting ourselves in the shoe of, we are releasing templates and we are moving to releasing components, but most of the value might just be more about not us as a producer of the templates, but more as development team. We do have some templates that we maintain ourselves in another location. I'm thinking about them, the dev template that we use across all the analyzers team, for instance. That is a great example for us. We maybe try to use components instead in that case. We maybe focus too much the dog fooding about those vendor templates that we send to customer, but maybe more of the value that the components bring is for us as developer, as builder of configuration, CI configuration. And this related to the latest point I made there is that, to me, when I look first glance at this feature, I see a lot of value coming from the catalog and the ability to easily build a configuration from reusable components. Just the technical part, just the component itself, I don't see that bringing a ton of value to the customer right now. And that's why we will look into that, but I'm not so sure that dog fooding just that part will provide you a lot of interesting feedback from the customer perspective on our security templates. But definitely, I think it could be interesting to have us testing that more for our development configurations.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also say that a component is the smallest building block of a catalog. And if we want to build a product right, bottom up, we need to start testing like the smallest part that we have. Because if we won't get this right, then eventually we'll have this really nice catalog. But the building block that actually construct the catalog will not provide the value, or will not be, will not work as we expect them to work. And then basically we are shaking the foundation of the catalog. And then if we need to change or switch something, we eventually could like disrupt the customer workflow. This is why when we introduce the component, we say, okay, let's introduce it, let's release it, let's dog food it. There is a value, there is some value with that. But yes, I agree that the major value will come with the catalog.
Just to add very quickly, since we are out of time, and one aspect of dog fooding this, which is perfectly legit, is to, if we create the static analyzer, for example, some of the security products in components, we convert them to components, and we dog food them in GitLab project, rather than using the templates, we use the component. That's a perfect way for us to dog food and start to get feedback on this. We don't have to get the customers to use components. That's not kind of necessarily the goal, but it would be like, let's at least start using internally the components and see what it feels like.
Alrighty. And with that, I think since we are a bit over time, thank you everybody for sticking around. We'll make that the last word. Thank you for taking your time. Well, we've got a lot of links and a lot of information here. So if anybody has additional questions, please let's continue the conversation async. I'm going to let this video process and intend to take this up to GitLab Unfiltered just to make sure everybody knows where this is going. So thank you for your time today, everybody, and have a good rest of your day. We'll talk soon. See ya.